Welcome back. Before we start, please like and subscribe, and comment down from where you are watching and what time it is there. Now let's start. I moved into Maplewood Drive a little over 2 years ago, trying to start over after a rough breakup and a burned-out job. I work from home now, doing freelance design work, so I wanted someplace quiet, someplace where people actually mow their lawns and say hi when they pass you on the sidewalk. Maplewood seemed perfect. Just rows of modest 2-story homes, kids riding bikes, the kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. The first night there, I was lying on an air mattress because my bed hadn't arrived yet. I was dead tired but couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. I remember scrolling through my phone when a weird glow caught my eye through the blinds. I looked out and saw the house directly across from mine. Every light in it was on, the porch, the living room upstairs, even what looked like the hallway. I thought, okay, maybe the guy forgot to turn them off. The next morning I left to grab coffee and those lights were still burning. Weird, but I brushed it off. By the third night, I noticed something that gave me chills. Around 3:07 a.m. I got up for water, looked out the window, and there he was, the man who lived there, standing perfectly still at his upstairs window, staring straight ahead into the night. He wasn't moving, not even shifting his weight. I figured he was just some insomniac or night owl, maybe reading or something. But when it happened again the next night, and the next, it started to get under my skin. Who stands at their window every night at the same exact time? After a week of it, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I'd find myself staying up just to see if he'd be there. He always was. A few days later, while checking my mail, I ran into an older lady from down the street, Mrs. Grant. She was friendly, chatty, the kind of person who knows everyone's business. I asked her casually, "Hey, what's up with the guy across the street? The one who never turns off his lights?" She looked uncomfortable right away. "Oh, that's Mr. Reeves," she said. "Been here longer than anyone. Keeps to himself. Little strange, but harmless." That word stuck with me. Harmless. Everyone says that before something isn't. After that, I started noticing the little details, the flicker of his lights, how his curtains never moved, how I'd sometimes see him during the day, just sitting on his porch, staring at nothing. The whole thing started to feel off. One night, for reasons I still can't explain, I decided to wave at him. Just a small wave, testing if he'd react. He didn't move. He just kept standing there, completely still. Then, after maybe 5 seconds, his light went out. All of them. The entire house went dark at once. I remember my stomach tightening. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. But the next morning, when I stepped outside, there was a white envelope sitting on my porch. No stamp, no address, just my name scrawled in shaky handwriting. I opened it. Inside was one line, "Don't stand at your window tonight." I didn't tell anyone about it. Who would believe me? That night I avoided the window. I sat on the couch, TV muted, lights dim. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps on the gravel outside, slow, crunching footsteps moving across my driveway. Then, 3 soft knocks on the glass. I froze. I didn't move an inch. Another knock. Then silence. I waited, heart racing until morning. When the sun came up, I finally looked. There were muddy smudges on the lower part of my window, like someone had pressed their face against it. The next day, I went to his house. Up close, it looked worse, peeling paint, weeds choking the yard, an old dented mailbox. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I was about to leave when the door creaked open just an inch. Through the gap, I saw him, thin, pale eyes sunken so deep they looked bruised. "You shouldn't come here," he said in this raspy, almost whispery voice. "I just wanted to check if you're all right," I said, trying not to sound freaked out. "You left something on my porch." He just stared at me for a few seconds, then said, "Don't look out your window after 3. That's when they come." Before I could ask what he meant, he shut the door. I tried to laugh it off, but those words stuck with me. That's when they come. Who was they? I didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that. But that night I couldn't resist. Around 3:07 I peeked out. His house was dark. For the first time since I'd moved in, there wasn't a single light on. I started to turn away when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. "I told you not to look." My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, then looked back outside. His curtains were fluttering slightly like someone had brushed past them. Then I saw my own reflection in the window, and it was smiling. I wasn't. I jerked back, blinked, and it was gone. The next few days were normal. Or maybe I just tried to make them feel that way. Then one afternoon I came home to flashing lights, an ambulance, a police car. Mrs. Grant was standing outside talking to an officer. I walked up, pretending to be curious but casual. "What happened?" I asked. She sighed. "Poor Mr. Reeves. They found him in his bed. Been dead for several days, apparently." I felt my chest tighten. "Several days? Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yeah, probably since the weekend. But that was impossible. I talked to him 2 nights ago. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed again. Same number, same message. Look outside." I hesitated, but curiosity always wins. I pulled back the curtain just a little, and there he was, Mr. Reeves, standing in my yard directly under the streetlight, looking up at my window. His skin looked gray, his eyes hollow. I couldn't move. He slowly lifted his hand and pointed at me. My lights flickered, then everything went dark. In the reflection of the black window, I saw myself again, but my reflection wasn't copying me. It was smiling that same awful grin. Then the power came back and he was gone. The next morning I didn't even bother calling the cops. What could I possibly say? "Hey, my dead neighbor's hanging out in my yard?" Yeah, right. I kept my curtains closed after that. Started sleeping during the day, working at night. Anything to avoid looking out that damn window. I convinced myself it was all stress or lack of sleep. A week later, a moving truck showed up across the street. A new guy was moving in, mid-20s, cheerful, friendly. We talked while he was unloading boxes. He laughed and said, "Man, this place gives me weird vibes. That old dude who lived here, did he seriously keep every light on all night?" I shrugged it off, trying not to sound crazy. "Yeah," I said. Guess he wasn't big on sleep. That night, the lights came on in the house across the street, the porch, the living room, the upstairs, every single one. I stared at them for a long time, frozen. Around 3:07, I couldn't help myself. I looked out again. The new guy was standing at the upstairs window, completely still, staring straight at my house. Just like Reeves used to. My chest felt tight. The next morning, when I went outside, I saw a white envelope sitting on his porch. The handwriting looked familiar, shaky, uneven. My heart started pounding. Then I saw something else. There was another envelope on my porch too. I picked it up, and this time it was addressed to me. Inside was a single line. "You shouldn't have waved." I moved into that apartment complex during my junior year of college, mostly because it was cheap and only 10 minutes from campus. The building looked like it had been around since the 60s. Yellowed bricks, narrow hallways that smelled like old carpet and microwaved leftovers, and those heavy wooden doors that never quite fit their frames. My place was on the 2nd floor, right above the laundry room, which rattled like a jet engine every time someone used the dryer. Still, for $600 a month, I couldn't complain. My next-door neighbor moved in a week after I did. Her name was Samantha. Mid-20s, brown hair always in a messy bun, glasses, quiet type. We exchanged polite hellos in the hallway a few times. She seemed normal, maybe a little shy, always carrying boxes or groceries late at night. Nothing about her stood out, at least at first. The first weird thing I noticed was the sound. It started around 2:30 in the morning on a Thursday. A slow dragging noise coming from below my floor, followed by a dull thump. At first I figured someone was moving furniture or the pipes were acting up. But it kept happening every night. Same time. Same rhythm. Like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I went downstairs one afternoon and checked the laundry room. The noise wasn't coming from there. The only other place below me was the basement, but that door was always locked with a maintenance-only sign. I asked the landlord, Mr. Turner, about it when I ran into him by the mailboxes. He laughed like I'd asked something stupid. "That basement's sealed off. Nobody goes down there. Just storage and old boiler stuff." I left it alone. But that night the dragging started. Again. Louder. Closer. I grabbed a broom handle and banged it on the floor, thinking maybe someone would stop, but the sound didn't change. It just paused, then started again. A week later, I was walking back from class around midnight when I saw Samantha coming up the hallway. She had her hoodie up and was carrying a big black trash bag that looked way too heavy for one person. When she saw me, she froze for a second, then smiled. "Hey," she said softly. "Late night laundry." She kept walking, but instead of heading toward the laundry room, she went down the hall toward the basement door. I didn't think much of it until I heard the click of the lock in the door creak open. The sign said, "Maintenance only," but she slipped inside like she had a key. The next morning, I casually mentioned it to Mr. Turner when he was fixing a light in the hallway. He frowned. That's impossible. No one has a key except me. He jingled his key ring like proof. You must have seen someone else. But I knew what I saw. That night, I tried to record the noise on my phone. I put it near the vent and left it running from 2 to 3. When I played it back in the morning, most of it was static until the 30-minute mark. There was a faint whisper, a dragging sound, then a woman's voice. It was hard to make out, but I swear it said, "Don't look." I decided to test something. I stayed up the next night, lights off, sitting by my window with a clear view of the basement entrance. Around 2:30, the hallway light flickered. The basement door opened just a crack. A narrow beam of light swept across the floor, like someone was moving a flashlight. I could hear the dragging again, slow and steady, like something being pulled down a corridor. Then the light went out and everything went quiet. The next morning, Samantha knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting that. She stood there smiling, holding a plate of cookies. "I baked too much," she said. "Figured I'd share." I took them, trying to play it cool. But there was flour on her sleeve and a faint rusty stain on her wrist. She noticed me looking and tucked her hand in her pocket. "Rough night?" she asked. I nodded, pretending I hadn't been awake the whole time. "Yeah, couldn't sleep. Weird noises again." Her smile faded for a split second before she shrugged. "Old pipes," she said, then turned and went back to her apartment. I waited until Saturday to make my move. I'd heard her leave earlier that evening with her usual heavy bag. Around midnight, I crept into the hallway. The basement door was closed, but the padlock hung loose, open. My heart was pounding, but curiosity had completely taken over. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air hit me immediately, cold, damp, and metallic like old coins and mold. I used my phone's flashlight. The basement was bigger than I expected, stretching way back into darkness. Old furniture was stacked against the walls. Broken chairs, rusted pipes, a water heater humming somewhere. The dragging marks on the floor were real, long black streaks leading deeper in. I followed them, every instinct in my body screaming to turn around. At the far end of the room was a wall covered in papers. I moved closer and realized they weren't papers. They were photographs, hundreds of them, overlapping each other, taped and pinned to the concrete. My mouth went dry. Each picture was of someone from the building, people I'd seen in the hallways, in the laundry room, at the mailbox. Some looked like security cam shots, others like they were taken through windows. People sleeping, eating, showering. There was one of Mr. Turner fixing a light bulb, one of the woman from 3B holding her cat. My hands were shaking when I spotted the last photo in the corner. It was me, lying in bed, lights off, face half turned toward the camera. The timestamp said 2:41 a.m., 2 nights ago. I heard a soft shuffle behind me. A voice whispered, calm and close. "You weren't supposed to see that." I spun around. Samantha stood at the bottom of the stairs, her hoodie half up, face blank in the flashlight glow. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, small, tired, almost sad. "You shouldn't have come down here," she said. My voice cracked. "What the hell is this?" She tilted her head like she didn't understand the question. "Someone has to watch," she said quietly. "They make me." I didn't wait to find out who they were. I bolted past her, up the stairs, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely dial. I called Mr. Turner, babbling something about the basement, photos, Samantha. He sounded annoyed, half asleep. "Kid, that door's locked. Has been for years. Go back to bed." I hung up and called the police. 2 officers showed up about 20 minutes later. I led them to the basement door, but when they opened it, everything was gone. The walls were bare. No photos, no smell, no streaks on the floor, just dust and cobwebs. One of the cops gave me that look people give when they think you're losing it. They checked Samantha's apartment next, empty, spotless, not a single piece of furniture, not even a toothbrush. It looked like no one had lived there in months. They left with a shrug, told me to get some rest. I barely slept that night. Every creak and groan of the building made my chest tighten. Around dawn, I heard a soft thud outside my door. When I opened it, there was a folded note taped to the wood. 3 words written in smudged ink. "You should have stayed quiet." I moved out that weekend. Mr. Turner didn't ask why. He just handed me my deposit envelope and said, "That unit's been empty since January. No one's rented it since the flood." I stopped packing and looked at him. "You mean next door?" 2B, he nodded. "Yeah, why?" I didn't answer. But when I stepped into the parking lot with the last of my boxes, I looked back at the second floor windows. The blinds in 2B were drawn tight, except for one small gap near the top. For a second, I could have sworn I saw a camera lens glint in the sunlight, like someone was still watching. Then the blind snapped shut. When I moved into that apartment downtown, I wasn't looking for excitement. I just needed space, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody knew my name or cared to. My last relationship had ended like a slow car crash, and I was too tired to pick up the pieces. The building was called the Harper, one of those mid-rise places with exposed brick. Big windows and rent just low enough to make you suspicious. I worked from home doing freelance design, so most nights I'd sit by my desk facing the courtyard, sketching logos or scrolling through clients' notes while the city hummed outside. I first noticed the woman across from me maybe a week after I moved in. Her apartment number was 313. I knew because it was directly across. Same floor, same layout. She sat by her window almost every night, motionless, sometimes with a drink in her hand, sometimes just staring out. At first I thought she was reading or watching TV, but the more I looked, the more I realized she was always looking right at me. I waved once. She didn't move. Not even a flinch. The next day I mentioned it to a guy from the 3rd floor I met in the elevator. His name was Chad, gym shorts, protein shake, the type who always smells faintly like cologne and laundry detergent. I said, "Hey, the woman in 313, she's there all the time, right? Seems kind of lonely." He frowned. "Nobody's in 313, dude. That place got flooded last winter. They gutted the drywall." I laughed it off, figuring he must have gotten the numbers mixed up. But that night she was there again. Same seat, same stillness. I remember telling myself it was just the reflection of something. Maybe a mannequin or the way the lights hit the window. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Over the next week, I couldn't stop noticing little things. Every night around midnight, her light would flicker on. I'd look up from my laptop and there she'd be, framed in that soft yellow glow. One night she lifted a glass, wine, maybe, and took a slow sip without breaking eye contact. I couldn't explain why it unnerved me so much, but it did. I even started timing it. 12:04 a.m., light on. 12:06 she appears. Every single night. I told myself I wasn't obsessed, that it was just curiosity. But I started to dream about her. In one dream, she was standing outside my door, knocking softly, whispering my name. When I opened the door, she was smiling, but her eyes were wrong, like she was there, but not really seeing me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat. One Friday night, after a few too many beers, I decided to prove to myself she was real. I put on a hoodie and walked across the courtyard to the other side. The hall smelled like bleach and something old, maybe water damage. Apartment 313 looked normal enough, door painted beige like the rest. Number slightly crooked. I knocked lightly. Nothing. I pressed my ear against the wood. That's when I heard it. Faint classical music. Violins drifting through the door. I knocked again. The music stopped. Completely. I waited another few seconds, heart pounding, before walking away. When I got back to my apartment, the light in her window was off. But when I sat down at my desk, it flicked on again, brighter than before. She was there, staring. I couldn't tell if she was angry or just blank. I pulled the blinds shut. A few days later, I saw maintenance guys in the courtyard talking to the building manager. One of them said, "They're finally sealing off that flooded unit. Smells like mildew." The manager nodded. "Yeah, 313's a mess. We'll gut it next month." That made no sense. I'd just seen her there the night before. That night, around midnight, I woke up to a soft tapping. Not on my window, on the wall behind my bed. 3 taps, then silence. Then again, tap, tap, tap. I sat up, listening. The building was old, so I told myself it was pipes or something expanding. But then I heard a muffled knock at my door. When I opened it, the hallway was empty, but taped to the door was a note. Thin white paper, neat handwriting. 3 words. "Stop looking at me." I felt this cold weight settle in my chest. I hadn't told anyone about her, not even Chad. My first thought was that someone was screwing with me. The next day, I went to the leasing office and asked about 313. The woman behind the counter looked confused. "That unit's still under renovation," she said. "We haven't had anyone in there since December." I told her I'd seen lights. Movement, a woman inside. She frowned, lowered her voice. "You're not the first tenant to say that." I asked what she meant, but she wouldn't elaborate. Just said, "If you're hearing or seeing anything strange, document it. I'll make a note for maintenance." That night I set up my phone to record. I left it pointed at her window from midnight to 1. When I checked the footage the next morning, my stomach dropped. The video showed my own window reflection. The empty courtyard, the dark apartment across the way. No lights, no woman, nothing. I even scrubbed through frame by frame, still nothing. I was starting to wonder if I was losing it. Maybe it was just the stress, the long nights, the isolation. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. That night I stayed up again. 12:04, nothing. 12:05, still dark. 12:06, the light flickered on. I leaned forward, heart racing. She was standing this time, right up against the glass. I couldn't make out her face clearly, but she was definitely looking straight at me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, one new text, don't. Before I could react, the lights in her apartment went out, total darkness. Then knocking again, this time from my balcony door. Slow, deliberate. I turned toward the glass and froze. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But behind me, faint and out of focus, was another figure. A woman's outline. I spun around. Nobody there. I yanked the blinds shut and backed away, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I barely slept. The next morning, police sirens woke me up. 2 cruisers parked outside, yellow tape across the courtyard. I stepped out and asked one of the officers what happened. He looked at his clipboard. Maintenance found a break-in. Someone forced their way into a sealed apartment. 3rd floor. My throat went dry. Which one? He glanced up. 3 to 13. I told him I lived across from it, that I'd seen someone there for weeks. He asked my name, took some notes, and told me to wait for a detective. When they finally cleared the scene, I could see through the cracked door of 313. The inside was stripped bare, no furniture, no lights, no signs of anyone living there. The walls were warped from water damage, the floor covered in dust. I moved out the next week, couldn't stay another night. I thought that was the end of it, until a few days later when a detective called. He said they'd reviewed the security footage. Around midnight, the night of the break-in, a man matching my description had entered 313 using a crowbar. No one else was seen entering or leaving. The apartment had been empty the whole time. I told him that was impossible. I told him about the woman, the lights, the note. He was quiet for a while, then said gently, "Mr. Carter, there's something else. We found your phone in there. It was recording." He paused. "You were alone in that video." I didn't know what to say. I still don't. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I catch myself glancing out the window. The new tenants across the courtyard keep their blinds open. A woman lives there now, I think. I try not to look, but once in a while, I catch a glimpse of her, sitting perfectly still, staring back at me. And I swear to God, it's the same face I saw in 313. I moved into that neighborhood for peace. That's what I told myself anyway. After the divorce, I just wanted quiet, somewhere to breathe without constant reminders of everything that went wrong. The place I found was perfect. Small cul-de-sac, trimmed lawns, big maple trees lining the street. The kind of place where people still wave to each other. I told myself I'd finally landed somewhere safe. My first morning there, I noticed the house across the street. 2-story light blue siding, white shutters, tidy porch. Looked lived in, but not overly kept. I saw a man, mid-40s, maybe 50s, watering the grass. He waved, I waved back. Later, I spotted a girl in one of the upstairs windows, sitting on the sill with her knees pulled to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 16. I figured she was his daughter. I saw her there a lot after that, always sitting in the same spot, same posture, staring blankly out at the street. It became kind of a routine. Every night around 9 when I'd be closing my laptop from work, I'd glance up and there she'd be. I never thought much of it. Kids these days live online anyway. Maybe staring out a window was her version of peace. But one night something felt off. I'd been up late watching a game when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked out, and she was staring right at me. Not in a casual glance sort of way, but directly into my window, like she knew exactly where I was sitting. Then her lips moved, no sound, just a faint whisper I couldn't hear. I leaned forward, trying to make it out, and then I saw it clearly. 2 words. "Help me!" I froze. She didn't blink. Just held that look for a few seconds before the lights in her room flicked off. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying it in my head, convincing myself I'd misunderstood. Maybe she was on the phone or practicing lines for some TikTok video or something. The next morning, the man across the street waved like nothing was wrong. I waved back automatically, but my stomach twisted. Over the next few days, the girl disappeared from the window. No sign of her, but I started noticing other things. The man's car would be gone at weird hours, like 3 in the morning. Once I saw him pull into the driveway just before dawn, headlights off, moving slowly, like he didn't want to wake anyone. I started telling myself stories. Maybe he worked night shifts, maybe she was grounded, maybe I was losing it. But then one night I was taking out the trash and I heard yelling. It came from their house, low, muffled but sharp, like someone was trying not to be heard. I stood there listening, heart racing. But when I crossed halfway up my driveway, the sound stopped. Dead silence. A moment later, the porch light across the street flicked on, and the man stepped outside. He looked around like he was checking the weather. Then he smiled. "Evening," he said, voice calm, like we hadn't both just heard screaming from inside his house. "Nice night, huh?" I nodded, said something dumb like, "Yeah, good night," and went back inside, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I told myself it wasn't my business. I barely knew these people. But once you notice something wrong, you can't unsee it. 2 days later, I found a folded piece of paper wedged into my mailbox. No envelope, just a note in shaky handwriting. It said, "Please don't tell him." That's all. No name, no explanation. My blood went cold. I looked around, half expecting to see someone watching me. But the street was quiet. I took the note inside, stared at it for an hour, and finally called the non-emergency police line. I told them I thought there might be a domestic situation happening across the street. The operator said they'd send someone to do a welfare check. Later that night, I saw 2 officers knock on their door. The man answered, calm as ever, chatting like everything was normal. They went inside for maybe 5 minutes before leaving. I watched from my window, fists clenched. The girl never appeared. The next day, the man gave me a friendly wave again, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something that said, "I know you called." That night, I couldn't stop pacing. I felt trapped between paranoia and guilt. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I didn't. I opened the blinds around midnight, half afraid of what I'd see. The girl was back in the window. Pale face, wide eyes, looking straight at me. I didn't move. Then she lifted her hand and pressed it against the glass. My chest tightened. And then she started banging on it. Slow at first, then harder. I grabbed my phone and called 911 again. When the cops arrived this time, I watched them cross the street. They knocked, got no answer, and eventually went around the back. One of them shined a flashlight through the windows. Then they both came back, said something to each other, and drove off. My phone rang a few minutes later. The dispatcher told me they checked the property and found no one inside. No sign of anyone living there. I stared at the phone, speechless. I told them that wasn't possible, that I'd seen her. But they said the house looked empty. Furniture covered. Dust everywhere. Power turned off for months. I didn't believe them. The next morning, I saw a moving truck in the driveway. The man was outside loading boxes. I walked over before I could think better of it. "Hey," I said, "you moving already?" He looked up at me with that same calm smile. "Yeah, time for a change, you know." I glanced toward the upstairs window. It was open now, curtains fluttering in the breeze. "Where's your daughter?" I asked before I could stop myself. His smile froze for a second. "I don't have a daughter," he said quietly. Then he climbed into the truck and drove off. The house sat empty for a week. Curiosity got the better of me. One evening I crossed the street, tried the front door, and it opened. The air inside was heavy with bleach and something else I couldn't place. Every footstep echoed. Upstairs, the window room looked smaller than I expected. Empty except for a chair. In the corner, and faint scratch marks along the windowsill. On the wall above the chair was a single Polaroid photo, taped crookedly. I stepped closer. It showed the girl. Same face, same window, smiling next to the man. She was holding a newspaper. The date on it was the same week I'd moved in. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the photo and left fast, heart pounding. I took it straight to the police. The officer at the desk looked confused. He left for a few minutes, came back with a file, and said quietly, "Sir, that property's been vacant for over 5 years. No registered owner since the bank foreclosure." I asked about the man, the girl, the photo. He shook his head. "You're not the first neighbor to ask," he said. "But no one's lived there in a long time." I went home in a daze. That night I sat in the dark staring out my window, the Polaroid on the table beside me. The house across the street was dark, silent. I told myself I wouldn't look anymore. I even started drawing the blinds every evening just to block it out. But a few weeks later, a for sale sign came down and a moving van showed up. I watched a new family unload their boxes, a man, a woman, and a teenage daughter. She looked exactly like the girl in the photo. Same hair, same clothes, same sad expression. That night, I couldn't resist. I pulled the blinds back and looked across the street one last time. There she was, sitting by the window, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at me. When I bought my first house, I thought I'd finally made it. A small place just outside Columbus. Nothing fancy, just a clean street lined with maples and mailboxes that still had actual newspapers in them. People waved when you drove by. It felt like the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens. My next-door neighbor, Tom, was the first to greet me. Mid-40s, clean haircut, plaid shirts, the kind of guy who looked like he could fix anything with duct tape. He showed up the day I moved in with a six-pack and a toolbox. "Welcome to the block," he said. "Figured you might need a hand." I liked him immediately. He helped me mount shelves, lent me his mower, even brought over cookies his wife, Lindsay, had baked. His kid, Tyler, was maybe 15, quiet, polite, always playing basketball in the driveway. If you could design the perfect suburban neighbor, you'd end up with Tom. We hung out a lot those first few weeks. Beers on the porch, barbecues, small talk about work. I told him I did IT from home. He told me he managed a hardware store across town. We swapped stories about bad bosses and worse ex-girlfriends. He was just easy to be around, until the night I heard shouting from his house. I was closing up my laptop, around midnight, when I caught the muffled sound of yelling through the open window. Two voices, Tom's and Lindsay's. It got louder, sharp, then suddenly cut off. I stared at my ceiling for a while after that, waiting for something else, but the neighborhood went silent again. The next morning, Tom was outside washing his truck like nothing happened. When I asked if everything was all right, he laughed. "Married life, man. You'll learn." I laughed too, but something about his tone sat wrong. Over the next week, things felt off. Lindsay stopped coming outside. Tyler's basketball hoops stayed empty. When I asked Tom where they were, he said they went to visit her sister in Michigan. But the way he said it, like he'd practiced it, made my stomach tighten. A few nights later, I was watching TV when I heard banging from his garage. Slow, heavy, metallic, like someone dragging a pipe across concrete. I told myself he was fixing something. Then I saw movement through the slats in my blinds. Tom, in the driveway, hauling a black trash bag toward the side gate. The thing sagged and thumped when it hit the ground. He noticed me watching and raised a hand with that same friendly smile. "Just cleaning up," he called out. I waved back, pretending not to care. The next morning, I saw a dark stain near his trash cans, reddish-brown. Probably oil, I told myself. Probably. The weirdest moment came 3 nights later when Tom knocked on my door holding an empty bleach bottle. "Got any spare cleaner?" he asked. His sleeves were rolled up, arms spattered with something pale, maybe drywall dust. "Trying to get rid of a smell in the garage. Dead raccoon or something." He chuckled. I handed him my bottle without thinking. He thanked me, smiled, and walked off. When I closed the door, my hands were shaking. The smell in the air wasn't dead animal, it was chemical, sharp. I started asking around. Mrs. Klein across the street said she hadn't seen Lindsay or Tyler in weeks. "That's strange," she said. "She usually walks the dog every morning." That night, my dog started barking like crazy at the fence between our yards. When I went out to quiet him, I saw Tom in his backyard with a shovel, working fast under the porch light. He froze when he noticed me. "Pipe burst," he said, panting. "Gotta dig it up before it floods." I nodded and went back inside. The next morning, the hole was gone, freshly covered, new sod laid down like nothing happened. That was the moment I called 911. I told them I suspected something bad happened next door. They came, talked to Tom, and searched his property. He even let them into the garage. 10 minutes later, they were gone. "Nothing there," one of the officers told me quietly. "Just tools and paint cans." "Try to relax, sir." Tom came over afterward, hands in his pockets. "Hey man, I didn't realize I was worrying you," he said softly. "I'm sorry if I've been noisy lately. Big projects, you know." His smile looked the same, but the skin around his eyes didn't. "Dinner tomorrow?" he added. "Lindsay and Tyler get back soon. Thought we could all hang out." I agreed, mostly out of guilt. Maybe I really was being paranoid. The next evening, Tom grilled steaks while I brought over a bottle of bourbon. The air smelled of meat and charcoal, and faintly of bleach. The house looked spotless, every surface gleaming. "Lindsay and Tyler not back yet?" I asked. He shook his head. "They're staying a few more days." We sat at the table, eating. Tom talked about the neighborhood, the HOA, stupid local politics. It almost felt normal again until he set down his fork and looked at me. "You know," he said quietly, "I really appreciate neighbors who mind their own business." He said it like a joke, but his eyes didn't move. My mouth went dry. I forced a laugh and changed the subject. I didn't stay long after that. When I got home, I locked the door and checked every window. I felt ridiculous, grown man scared of a barbecue. Around midnight, I went to take my dog out and saw something taped to my front door. A photograph. It was me, sitting at Tom's dinner table that evening, raising my glass. The photo had been taken from inside his house, from the hallway behind me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, squad cars filled the street. They were parked outside my house. An officer told me a neighbor had called about a foul odor near my fence line. They started digging near the corner of my yard, right where the fence met Tom's. A few minutes later, one of them shouted for the others. I didn't need to see what they found. The look on their faces told me everything. When they finally let me inside my house that night, I noticed the fence post near the hole was new. Different wood, fresh cement. Turns out Tom had shifted the property line sometime over the past month. The section he dug on wasn't technically his anymore. It was mine. The news trucks came that evening. The headline said, "Remains found beneath local man's backyard. Investigation ongoing." They mentioned my name like I was a suspect, then cleared it later when the evidence pointed next door. Tom was gone by then. Packed up before sunrise, left no forwarding address, no records, no fingerprints. The police said the bodies, 2 adults and 1 teenager, had been buried for less than 2 weeks. They asked if I'd noticed anything unusual. I told them yes. I told them everything. But every time I got to the part where Tom smiled, the words caught in my throat. The neighborhood changed after that. For sale signs popped up like mushrooms. The lawns started to brown. Nobody waved anymore. Sometimes at night, I still hear faint metallic noises coming from the other side of that fence. Scraping, digging, just under the surface. I tell myself it's the wind or maybe raccoons. But every now and then my dog stands at the back door growling low, staring at that patch of dirt that never quite settled right. And sometimes when the porch light flickers, I swear I can see him, Tom, standing just beyond the fence line, smiling like the good neighbor he always was. I moved into the new house at the farm, end of the cul-de-sac, just as the rain began to fall, steady and cold, turning the asphalt into a dull reflection of the gray sky. I remember thinking the neighborhood looked too perfect. Symmetrical lawns, clean driveways, and houses that all seemed to hold their breath at the same time. The real estate agent had called it a quiet suburban sanctuary, and that was exactly what I wanted after the chaos of the city: peace, stability, a fresh start. The house was a 2-story colonial, light blue with white shutters and a small porch that faced the street. It had that American dream feel, like something out of an old commercial. And I couldn't shake the thought that it almost looked staged, too clean, too balanced, too normal. But I signed the papers, moved in, and told myself that normal was exactly what I needed. That illusion lasted one night. The first evening I unpacked just enough to get by. The rain outside never stopped. It became this soft, endless background noise, calming but somehow lonely. Around midnight, I turned off the TV and started hearing faint noises upstairs. Not the kind you dismiss easily. These weren't house creaks or wind sounds. They were deliberate, rhythmic, human, slow footsteps moving across the attic floor. I froze in the living room, holding my breath. I told myself it had to be pipes or the roof expanding. But then the footsteps paused directly above me, then started again, pacing back and forth. I finally grabbed my flashlight and went up. The attic door was at the end of the hallway, paint peeling, handle cold. When I opened it, the smell hit me immediately. Dust, mold, and something faintly metallic. I scanned the flashlight across boxes. Old furniture, a cracked mirror, a single gray coat hanging on a hook. Everything was still. I felt stupid for creeping myself out, so I left the door open and went back down. But the next night it happened again. The same pattern, the same hour, around 3:15 a.m. That time, when I climbed up to check, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the dust, fresh ones. They were small, like a woman's, and led from the attic door to the window and back again. The next morning they were gone, completely gone. I started recording the nights, setting my phone to capture sound. Each morning I'd play it back. And the noises were clear, the footsteps, the dragging of something heavy, and once a faint whisper. At first I thought it was the rain distorting the audio, but then I heard my name, faint, drawn out, as if from a distance. Eli. My name is Eli, by the way. I laughed it off, but inside I was shaking. Nobody else had my number. Nobody knew I'd moved here yet. The following evening, the neighbor across the street introduced herself. Older lady. Kind eyes. The type who bakes cookies for new homeowners. She looked at me oddly when I mentioned the attic. I joked about the ghost upstairs, expecting her to laugh. She didn't. She just frowned and said quietly, "You shouldn't go up there at night." I pressed her for more, but she changed the subject, handed me banana bread and walked off into the rain. That night I couldn't sleep. The storm outside had gotten worse, wind hammering, branches scratching the windows. Around 3:10 I heard the attic door creak open by itself. My body froze. The floorboards above me groaned as something heavy moved. I reached for my phone flashlight and walked into the hallway. The attic door was wide open now, swaying gently like it was breathing. I whispered, "Hello?" And the movement stopped. Then I heard a woman's voice whisper back, "Hello?" I dropped the phone and ran down the stairs. I didn't go up again that night. The next morning I went online and dug through local archives. The house had belonged to a woman named Sarah Holloway, who'd gone missing in 1999. They never found her body, but neighbors said she was not right in her final months, sleepwalking, talking to herself, keeping the attic light on all night. One article mentioned the police finding her coat hanging in the attic, untouched for weeks. My stomach twisted when I read that. The gray coat. I went back up that afternoon to check it. It looked exactly like the one described. Long, woolen, with small dark stains near the cuffs. I tried to tell myself it wasn't the same one. Maybe someone just left it, but the label inside had her initials stitched in. S.H. That night, I dreamed of her. I was standing in the attic and she was behind me, whispering things I couldn't understand. When I turned, her face was inches from mine. Pale, eyes black and endless. I woke up gasping, rain pounding harder than ever. My phone buzzed beside me with a new audio clip automatically recorded by the app. I hadn't turned it on. It was 27 seconds long. The first 10 seconds were silence, then the creak of the attic door opening, footsteps coming down, and finally my own voice whispering, "You belong here." I don't remember saying that. The next day I tried to leave, packed a few things, started the car. The rain was relentless. But when I reversed out of the driveway, the engine died. Just stopped. All the lights in the house flickered at once. Through the windshield I saw the attic window glowing faintly, and for a split second, I saw her silhouette standing there. I ran inside, furious and terrified at the same time, yelling, "What do you want?" No answer. Just the attic light turning off. Then on, then off again. I went up one last time, determined to end it. The smell was stronger, damp, earthy, like wet soil. The gray coat was gone. In its place, a small pile of dirt shaped like a mound. Something metallic glinted in it. I knelt, brushed it aside, and found an old house key, rusted, curved but engraved with the same initials. As I held it up, a cold hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, heart seizing, but nobody was there. The air shimmered faintly, and I swear I heard breathing right beside my ear. "Stay," it whispered. Then something slammed into me from behind. I hit the floor hard, light went out, and I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, it was morning. The attic door was shut tight, and I was lying on the living room couch, wrapped in the gray coat. My head ached, but I hadn't brought the coat downstairs. There was mud on the floor leading from the stairs to where I lay. I decided then to sell the house. But before I could even list it, I got a call from the neighbor, the same older woman. She asked if I'd heard the rain last night. I said yes. She sighed and said, "It always rains when she wakes up." Then she hung up. I never heard from her again. When I finally left, I didn't look back. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my new apartment. No return address. Inside was a small box containing the same attic key, and a note that said, "You left the door open." I threw it out immediately. But the next time it rained, I heard footsteps above me again, faint, slow, deliberate. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment building now. There's no attic. That's when I realized she never needed the house to find me. The rain was just how she moved, how she crossed between places, between people. So every time it storms, I keep all lights off. I don't speak her name, and I pray she doesn't remember mine. Because if you hear footsteps above you, when it rains, no matter where you live, don't go looking. Don't even breathe too loudly. She'll think it's me and she'll come down to check. When I first moved into the cul-de-sac, the house next door was the only one with its curtains always closed, day and night. Every other house had kids playing outside, cars coming and going, lights flicking on and off. But that one, it stayed still, like it was holding its breath. Everyone called it the Myers place. They said the guy who lived there, Richard Myers, was some kind of recluse. Nobody ever saw him leave, not even for groceries. His yard was overgrown, mailbox stuffed full. Yet sometimes at night, I'd see the faint glow of a lamp moving from room to room behind those curtains, as if someone was pacing with it. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was the new neighbor, didn't want to be nosy. But I couldn't help noticing weird things, like my trash can being moved closer to my porch overnight, or muddy footprints appearing along my driveway leading nowhere. The first real incident happened on a rainy Wednesday evening. I came home late from work, parked, and saw movement in my peripheral vision. A light flicked on in the Myers house upstairs. The curtain shifted slightly, and for just a second, I saw a pale face peering through, a man's face. Eyes wide, staring straight at me. I waved instinctively, but the curtain snapped shut. I laughed it off, went inside, and tried to forget it. The next morning, a small package was sitting on my porch. No name, no return address, just wet cardboard. Inside was a photo, an old Polaroid, faded and water-stained. It showed my house, my front yard, but from the angle of the Myers' second-floor window. In the picture, I was standing in the driveway, looking up, except I didn't remember ever looking up like that. My stomach dropped. I decided to knock on his door. Maybe it was some kind of prank, or maybe the old man needed help. But when I got there, the mailbox was gone. The yard had been cleared, and there was a brand new lock on the door, bright and silver, like it had just been installed that morning. I knocked, no sound. Knocked again. Then I heard something. Inside, like furniture being dragged, slowly across the floor. I stepped back, rain soaking through my jacket. And that's when the curtain moved again. This time I saw two faces, one behind the other. Both pale, both staring down at me. The one in front was definitely Richard. The one behind him looked like me. My knees went weak. I turned and walked fast back to my porch, trying not to run, trying not to think. That night I barely slept. The rain came hard, wind howling against the windows. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a soft tapping on my back door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. My dog Benny started growling low, ears pointed toward the kitchen. I grabbed a flashlight and crept over. The rain distorted everything outside, but through the glass door I saw a shadow standing on my patio. It didn't move. I shone the flashlight directly at it, and there was nothing there. Just wet pavement and empty air. I locked every door, every window, and waited for daylight. The next morning I went next door again. Same silence, but something was different. On the ground near the porch were wet footprints. Bare feet, adult size. They led from his door straight toward my house. I called the police then. They checked the property, found nothing. Said the place was abandoned. I told them I saw someone. They said no one had lived there in 5 years. The owner had died in 2018. My blood ran cold. Died? I asked. The officer nodded. Yeah, heart attack, alone. Found in the living room chair, facing the window. That didn't make sense. I'd seen him just 2 nights ago. I even waved at him. The officer must have seen the confusion on my face because he asked if I wanted to take a look for myself. Against my better judgment, I did. The inside was old, moldy, and smelled of wet dust. Furniture still there, covered in sheets. The wallpaper was peeling, and rain dripped from the ceiling in slow rhythm. In the center of the living room sat a recliner facing the window. On the small table beside it was an old lamp, still plugged in, and beside that, a single Polaroid camera. The officer turned to leave, radio crackling, and for a moment I was alone in that silence. Then I noticed something on the wall, hundreds of Polaroids pinned up in rows. Every single one was of the street, every house, every person, and most were recent. Some showed me mowing my lawn, sitting on my porch, even sleeping on my couch through my living room window. My hands started shaking. That's when the officer called me from outside. I backed away, heart pounding. Before I stepped out, I turned one last time, and that's when I saw it. The newest photo, pinned right in the center. It showed me, standing exactly where I was now, in that living room. But in the background behind me was a dark figure with hollow eyes and a blurred face. I ran out of that house and never looked back. The police couldn't explain it. They said maybe squatters had been using the house. But after that day, things didn't stop. Every night I'd find new Polaroids on my porch, always wet from the rain, always showing me doing something from the day before, walking the dog, talking on the phone, cooking. Then one morning there was one photo left that made me sick. It showed me sleeping, taken from above my bed. I tore through my house, checked every door, every inch of the attic and basement, nothing. I left that night and stayed in a motel for a week. When I came back, my front door was open. Inside, the furniture was all turned to face the windows, just like in Richard Myers' house. And sitting in my recliner, facing out toward the street, was the old Polaroid camera. I picked it up. It was still warm, like it had just been used. I flipped it open and one last picture popped out. I didn't want to look, but I did. It showed me holding the camera, standing exactly where I was. But behind me, just out of focus, was Richard Myers. His face was gray, eyes rolled white, his hand resting on my shoulder. I dropped it and ran outside into the pouring rain. When I looked back, the curtains in his house were open for the first time in years. The light inside flickered once, then went out completely. I tried to tell people, but nobody believed me. They said the old Myers house was demolished last month. But that's impossible, I was just there. The weirdest part? A few days later, my doorbell rang. I opened it and found a man standing there, soaked, clutching a package. He looked nervous, eyes darting between me and the street. He said, "Sorry, I think this was meant for you." Then he handed me a box. When I looked down at the label, it was addressed to Richard Myers, 14 Cedar Lane, my address. I looked up to ask where he got it. But the man was already gone, vanished into the rain. Inside the box was a brand new Polaroid camera and a note that said, "Keep taking pictures. It helps you stay real." Since then, I can't go a single night without checking my windows. Because sometimes when lightning flashes, I see someone across the street holding a camera, waiting for the flash to come back. And if you ever find a Polaroid of yourself that you don't remember posing for, burn it. Don't keep it, because once he captures you, you stop showing up in mirrors, and only the photos remember what you looked like. When I first moved into that neighborhood, I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a quiet place away from the city noise, a yard big enough for my dog, and a little peace of mind. The house I found sat at the end of a curved suburban street, neat rows of homes stretching like cloned smiles under the gray sky. It rained the day I moved in, steady drizzle that made the pavement shine like glass, and everything smelled of wet asphalt and pine. The neighbors waved politely, but none came close. I figured that was fine. I wasn't there to make friends. The house right next door was the only one that stood out. It looked older, faded yellow siding with ivy creeping up one side, its windows dark even during the day. On the first night, as I carried boxes in, I noticed a woman standing in that window watching me. She had long hair, pale face, no expression at all. When I waved, she didn't move. I told myself she was just curious about the new neighbor. But even after I shut my blinds, I could feel her gaze on me. The next morning, I saw her again, outside, this time standing by her mailbox, in the rain without an umbrella, looking at my house. I was about to say hello when she turned around and walked back up her path. Her movements were strange, slow, stiff, like someone replaying a memory instead of living it. That night I heard knocking. Not at my door, but faint, like someone tapping the wall between our houses. It was so rhythmic I thought maybe she had a hammer or something. But when I went outside, her house was completely dark. The tapping stopped the moment I stepped off my porch. The next day I asked around. A guy jogging by said nobody lived there. Not since the incident, I pressed him. But he just shrugged and said, "You'll see." That stuck with me. Later that week, I came home from work around midnight. The street was empty, slick with rain. My porch light flickered as I unlocked the door. Inside, my dog Milo was growling softly, facing the front window. I followed his stare, and sure enough, that woman was back, standing in my yard this time, half hidden by the rain, her hair plastered to her face. I called out, asked if she needed help. She didn't move. I stepped closer, heart pounding. And that's when I noticed something off. Her clothes weren't wet. The rain passed right through her. My breath caught in my throat, and when I blinked, she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, muddy footprints led from my front door to the hallway mirror, stopping right in front of it. Only one set, small and bare. Milo refused to go near them, whining until I cleaned the floor. That evening, the neighbor 2 houses down, a middle-aged man named Don, came by to introduce himself. When I mentioned the woman, his face went white. He said, "You've seen her?" Like he didn't want to believe it. I nodded, and he told me the story. 10 years ago, a woman named Clara lived in that yellow house. Her husband was a long-haul trucker, gone for weeks at a time. One night, during a storm, she called 911, screaming that someone was in her attic. Police came, found nothing. A week later, same call. This time they found her hanging from the rafters, eyes open as if watching something above her. The attic window had been broken from the inside, but nobody ever figured out how. After that, no one stayed in that house longer than a few months. I tried to laugh it off, but that night the rain came harder. And again I heard the tapping, this time right behind my headboard. Milo barked and backed into the corner. I whispered, "Stop," half hoping, half daring. The sound stopped. Then came another, faint humming. A woman's voice, low and broken. It was coming through the vent. I pressed my ear close, and the words became clearer. "He's still here." I shot up, heart hammering, checked the attic even, though I swore I wouldn't. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing boxes, insulation, and old wood beams slick with moisture. The air was thick, cold. In the corner, something was scratched into the wall. "He watches from the attic." The letters were carved deep, flakes of paint curling around them. I stepped closer, and my flashlight flickered out. The sound of footsteps above me, on the roof, made me freeze. Slow, deliberate steps. Rain poured through a crack in the ceiling, dripping onto my neck. I turned to leave, and in that flash of lightning through the small window, I saw her face reflected in the glass right behind me. I fell down the ladder, hit the floor hard, scrambled up, and slammed the attic door shut. The next morning, sunlight almost made me believe it hadn't happened. I decided to go next door and face whatever this was. The yellow house looked abandoned, paint peeling, porch sagging, but the front door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, calling out softly. The smell hit me first. Damp wood, rot, something sour beneath it. Dust floated in the thin light from the windows. The living room still had furniture covered in white sheets. A family photo on the mantel. A man, woman, and little boy. The woman was Clara. I went upstairs, step by creaking step, until I reached the attic. The door was half open, a faint draft blowing through. Inside, the walls were covered with writing, same words repeated hundreds of times. "He's in the walls," and the center of the room was an old chair and a noose hanging from a beam. My chest went cold. I turned to leave, but heard someone whisper my name, soft and close. "Eli." My flashlight flickered again, and there she was in the corner, Clara, head tilted, eyes hollow, rope still around her neck. I couldn't move. She stepped forward and said, "He's still here," pointing past me. I turned, and for a split second saw something crouched in the rafters, dark and twitching, eyes gleaming like a raccoon's, but too human. I bolted, fell down the stairs, ran outside into the rain. When I looked back, the attic window was glowing faintly. I swore I saw two figures, her and that thing, watching me. That night I packed to leave, but every time I looked out the window, she was there again, standing between the houses, rain washing over her, head tilted. I shouted, "What do you want from me?" And her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then, faintly, I heard the whisper again. "He's still here." I slammed the blinds shut, sat on the floor, shaking. Around 3 a.m., my phone lit up with a notification, motion detected, living room camera. I didn't have a camera, but when I opened the app, the feed showed my living room, viewed from above, like from the ceiling. I watched as my own sleeping body turned slightly on the couch. Then in the frame, a pale hand appeared, brushing against my hair. The feed cut to static. I threw the phone away, grabbed Milo, and drove off without even turning off the lights. I moved 2 towns over, different county, different number. For a few months, it was peaceful. Then one night, it started raining again. I was lying in bed, drifting off, when I heard that familiar soft tapping on the wall. 3 knocks. Pause, 3 more. Milo whined, pawing at the corner. My phone buzzed again. Motion detected. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The feed showed my new living room, and standing by the window was Clara, soaked, eyes black, rope swaying gently. Then behind her, that same shadow moved along the ceiling, too tall, too thin. She looked straight at the camera and whispered one word before it all went dark. "You." I never used to believe in curses or anything supernatural, but moving into the new neighborhood changed that completely. My house was ordinary, cream siding, dark shutters, a small porch, but the house next door, the one everyone whispered about, was something else entirely. They called it the Mirror House, and for good reason. From the street, it looked normal enough, though the siding had faded to a dull gray, and the front yard had weeds curling up between the cracks of the sidewalk. But the windows were odd, large, almost floor to ceiling. and the main one reflected everything in the street with a strange distortion, like rippling water. The previous owner, an old man named Mr. Callahan, was a recluse. People said he hadn't left the house in decades, but sometimes, late at night, neighbors reported faint lights flickering behind the curtains, and occasionally, the sound of something moving inside when nobody should have been there. I didn't pay much attention to the stories at first. I liked quiet, and the neighborhood was peaceful during the day. My first week, though, I began to notice things. Every night, without fail, around 2 a.m., a dim light would flicker on. Upstairs in the mirror house, I would stare, through the blinds, trying not to, and every time, I thought I saw the old man sitting perfectly still, staring at the giant mirror on the wall. He never moved, never blinked, just sat. Days later, I learned he had died a few months ago. I asked a neighbor, curious, and they told me he passed quietly in his sleep. No one found him for days, and the house had been completely empty since then. I laughed nervously at myself for staring at a dark, empty house, but the unease grew when I noticed the mirror seemed to face my window perfectly, as though angled specifically to watch my living room. I closed my curtains thinking that would be enough. It wasn't. The first real incident happened on a Friday night. The rain had started early, hammering against the windows, and I had stayed up late watching old movies, half expecting a quiet night. Around 2:15 a.m. I heard a faint tapping, soft, deliberate, like fingernails on glass. I froze. My apartment was on the ground floor facing the street, and I knew the sound wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from that window next door, the mirror house. Heart hammering, I inched closer to the blinds. At that moment, the reflection in the glass changed. It wasn't a reflection of the empty street. It was me, standing in my living room, though I was sitting on the couch. My reflection raised a hand slowly, deliberately, and even though I wasn't moving, it mimicked the motion. I stumbled back, nearly falling over the rug. Then it moved faster, waving at me. I didn't know if it was a trick of light or my mind, but instinct screamed at me to get away. The next morning, I went to investigate. The mirror house looked abandoned. The yard was overgrown, weeds choking the porch. The front door was unlocked. I debated going inside, my rational mind telling me not to. But curiosity, a dangerous, nagging curiosity, won. The inside smelled of damp wood and old dust. Furniture was covered in white sheets, and every step I took made a hollow creak. The mirror was there, as expected, stretching from floor to ceiling, reflecting the room perfectly. Though I noticed the image wasn't exactly right, my reflection seemed sharper, darker somehow, and in it, I could see shapes moving behind me that weren't in the room. My skin crawled. The air grew heavy, thick, and cold. I thought about leaving, but then I saw it. My reflection lifted its hand, and this time I realized my body was frozen. I couldn't move my arms, my legs, nothing. My reflection leaned closer to the mirror and whispered, though no sound reached me, "It's your turn." Panic overtook me. I tried to scream, but only a strangled sound escaped. Then a shadow detached itself from the corner of the room inside the mirror. It was tall, thin, malformed, with limbs bending in ways that made no sense. It reached toward the glass. I felt a cold pressure against my chest, and suddenly my reflection's face contorted into a grin I didn't recognize, a grin I could feel pressing into my skull. I fell backward, hitting the floor hard, and for a moment the lights flickered and the mirror went black, reflecting nothing. I scrambled to my feet and ran out, slammed the front door, and didn't look back. That night, lying in my bed, I tried to convince myself it was all imagination. Then I noticed the mirror in my bedroom. I didn't own a mirror that size, and it wasn't there before. It had appeared overnight, reflecting the room with an impossible clarity. I stared into it, frozen, and then saw my own face looking back at me, but not quite my own. The eyes were hollow, the lips drawn into a smirk. I thought of the words my reflection had whispered. The pressure returned on my chest, stronger this time, and a voice hissed in my ear. "Now it's your turn." I ran into the kitchen, smashed every mirror I could find, but that only made it worse. Reflections appeared on the walls, the windows, in the rain-streaked street outside. Every reflective surface held that hollow-eyed version of me. Smiling a little too long, I could feel it crawling closer, always just behind the glass, always reaching for me. Sleep became impossible. Each night I dreamt of myself stepping through mirrors into that other place, trapped behind a warped glass version of my own life. The rain made it worse, tapping, streaking, highlighting each reflection like a stage spotlight. One night, desperate, I went to the hardware store and Bought blackout curtains for every window in the apartment. I nailed them up, triple layered, thinking that might shield me. The first night I thought I was safe. But around 2 a.m., I heard soft footsteps on the ceiling above me, slow, deliberate. I held my breath. Then came a soft creak, my own bedroom door opening. I didn't dare look. A shadow passed in front of the curtains, brushing against them. The next morning, I found tiny droplets of water on the floor near my bed, like someone had walked through a rainstorm into my apartment. I swore I saw prints leading to the bathroom, then disappearing. Weeks went by like this. I didn't sleep, I didn't look outside. I didn't leave the apartment except for work, but even there I felt it. Mirrors in the office, reflective glass in elevators, windows of cars everywhere. The hollow-eyed version of me followed, watching, waiting. One night, while packing to move again, I heard a sound I'll never forget, a knock at my front door, faint, slow. I didn't answer. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but then my phone buzzed. I had a notification from the security camera I didn't own. I opened the app and the live feed showed me, inside my bedroom, asleep. Behind me, a pale hand rested on my shoulder. I spun around, nothing. The feed cut. When I looked back at the window, the curtains swayed, and in the reflection, my own face smiled at me. It wasn't me. The eyes were hollow. And it whispered finally in a voice that shook my very soul, "Your turn."